Hey, jumping back on for a second part of my video to look at prompt number 3, where Dr. Brown asks us to use the readings to define stakeholder concepts, then describe a type of nonprofit stakeholder category from the readings. I'm just going to begin with Freeman and Reed, where uh, they talk about the stakeholders and explain the difference between a stockholder and a stakeholder. Stakeholders are groups who have a stake in the actions of the corporation. So groups without whose support the organization would cease to exist. And then jumping down into the reading, there are two different types of stakeholders. One is the wide sense stakeholder, an identifiable group or individual who can affect the achievement of an organization's objectives or who is affected by the achievement of organization objectives. So I think right there we're talking about various stakeholders. When you look at the 7 different groups that have been talked about in several of the readings, donors, clients, board, partner organizations, local community, employees, and volunteers, all of which can affect the achievement of the organization, but the people who benefit most from that are the local community. And so then it looks at the narrow sense of a stakeholder, an identifiable group or individual on which the organization is dependent for its continued survival. And I think that when you look at those 7 donors again, you're looking at, your 7 stakeholders. I really think that obviously you can't have an organization without local community who have the needs for the services that you're trying to provide. But really, you cannot do your job if you don't have money and qualified people. So I think when it comes to the narrow sense of a stakeholder, I would identify the donors as a primary stakeholder. Partner organizations. I think that I don't know that is that a nonprofit would be defined by an organization, but I do think that there's benefits for those partnerships. And then, of course, your employees. Finding people that are willing to work in nonprofits and give time and effort and energy, knowing that there's not a huge financial gain, but that you're really doing it for the good of something or others, is really important. When you look at the broader sense of this, every single one of those 7 stakeholders play a huge role in the success of a nonprofit. I also wanted to look at or discuss, the conceptual foundation that Dr. Brown looked at, and that stakeholder relationships are required to have this two-way connection between donors. And really, and looking further into the future, excuse me, and kind of what's happening right now, I think the private sector donors are going to be a vital part, an integral part to the success of some of these nonprofits, and the local community, like realizing that they're not ready to let go, and seeing what happens on that funding side of grant funding and government funding for the continued use of these nonprofit organizations for local communities. Have a good night.